What's up, YouTube? Hope you guys are out there building shit. Using your God-given hands, taking on projects, building, fixing, creating. This is the workshop where I teach you guys to use your hands, do hands-on, blue-collar activities, build up your self-esteem, your self-worth by accomplishing things. Last week, I did an unboxing of this Extreme Raw Power Centrifuge by wvodesigns.com. This week, I'm going to show you how to assemble it and wire up the control box to get it running. I've seen a lot of people asking how to wire this thing up. A lot of people struggling with getting it running. So if I help you out, if I give you some information you needed to set up your machine, hit that like button before you take off. It really helps out with this small YouTuber trying to grow, trying to beat those evil algorithms. So last week I did an unboxing and we pulled this all out. If you want to go back and check out that video, it'll be in the description. We got the bag of parts, the electronics, legs, a lid, a motor, and the actual centrifuge unit. We also got this instruction book, and the beginning of the instructions tell you the list of tools that you're going to need. We need a 3/32, a 5/32, and a 7/32 Allen wrench. We need a socket, size 7/8, and the ratchet, Phillips screwdriver, a 1 1/8 inch wrench, a 5/8 inch wrench, and a 1/2 inch wrench, a mallet, thread sealant, and some bearing grease. So I grabbed all that stuff up out of my tools and we're gonna get started. First things I'm gonna do is dump this bag of goodies into one of the boxes that this stuff came in so that I can find what I'm looking for a little easier. I go through and kind of put things into different sections, and the first step calls for these screws to put the legs on. There we go. Step one. The leg got those little indentions in the back. Line them up on there. Leg takes 2 screws. And you don't want to over tighten those screws because they are going into aluminum, guys. My Allen wrench didn't want to come out of there. So there we've got all 3 legs mounted, and it is worth noting that you just put a leg on every other one of these mounting spots. Doesn't really matter where you start, just do every other one. Now step 2 is to attach the latches. So we'll find all the 6 screws and the latches in our box of parts. 6 screws and 3 latches. Pretty simple and straightforward so far. If I could not drop screws. Now I'll get the other 2 mounted. Got all 3 latches mounted. Now, step 3 is to attach the vibration dampeners to the legs. Let's jump into the box. There's the 3 vibration dampeners. And here is the 3 bolts. One of these goes on each leg. Use your 1/2 inch wrench. Get them tightened. It's a little tricky to get those bolts started through the rubber. Tighten them up. There we go. All 3 of the rubber feet are installed. So now, step number 4. Press in the oil seal to the bottom of the centrifuge housing with the concave side facing up. Looks like it came in a little box, so we'll get it pulled out of that little box. And the concave side face up. So I found a socket that fits it, and I'm going to tap it in, but I'm going to grease that hole just a tad bit to help it slide in and not damage itself. So go ahead, put a little dab of grease around there, rubbed it around, get this set back in there nicely, and then I'm going to go ahead and set that socket. It's seated. Now, step 5 calls for this bushing deal and the other seal, and we're going to press it. Uh-oh, drop something again. So again, I'm going to take just a tad bit of grease, run that grease around the inside of where I've got to press that bearing, in the hopes that it helps it slide in better without damage. And this one, as pictured, goes in like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and tap it in. So I'm going to use the lid as a nice flat spot. Found a socket that fits that, and I'm going to give it some taps. Need to go a little further. I'm going to shut you guys off so you don't have to listen to the bangs. Next step is to tap that assembly into the base where we installed that other bearing, or I guess seal. So let's tap that in. So I used a socket on a little extension, and I tapped that down in. It's nice and flush all the way around the bottom. So the next step it's telling me is to take my angles and screw them to the barbed fittings. Well, the problem is my kit came with the angles. It does not have barbed fittings. So I don't know if my kit's missing it. Maybe they quit including them. I'm not real sure. But I'm just going to go ahead and buy some for PEX, because I really didn't want to use the barbed fittings anyways. I wanted to convert mine to PEX. And on top of that, I don't want to call and complain to the company, because, I mean, they upgraded my kit, a $400 upgrade for free, from the normal raw power centrifuge to the extreme raw power centrifuge. So I'm pretty grateful to the company right now, and I don't want to bother them with it. It's not a real big deal to me. So I went a little crazy on Amazon. Got a bunch of 3/4 inch valves. I'll explain that later why I got so many. We got the male MPT into PEX for 1/2 inch. We got the same thing, 3/4 inches. We got angled male NPT into PEX. We got a couple of female NPT into PEX. We got a couple more female into male adapters to go from 3/4 to 1/2. And then this bag with T's, elbows, and straight PEX fittings. Ran out to my storage container and I grabbed my thread sealant with PTFE. This is supposed to be diesel and oil and gas, etc. safe. So I'm going to use this to seal up my threads. So let's continue building this centrifuge. So instead of doing the angles down and then a barbed adapter, we're just going to do an angle into PEX adapter for both of the bottom pieces, the clean outlet and the dirty outlet on the bottom of the centrifuge. So I'll get this open, and we're going to use this on the threads. There we go. Now that we got it pipe doped up, go ahead and get that screwed in to the clean outlet. I'll go ahead and get this tightened up. So there's the first one, pipe doped and tightened up. Now, got to do another one for the dirty oil side. There's number 2. Next step is mounting of the motor. So it says get the screws and the little rubber O-rings out of the remaining parts in our box. So there's the 4 O-rings, there's the 4 screws. It says the O-rings go into each of these holes. Now, something that I've learned over the years, when you're doing O-rings and getting it tightened against them, a little bit of grease helps, because otherwise you might tighten down against that O-ring, and then as it's turning, it kind of tears it a little bit, and you end up with a leak. So it's better to lubricate that screw against the O-ring and help it seal better. I'm going to go ahead and put a little dab of grease around each of those O-rings before I put the screws in. I also greased up where that motor shaft is going to come through. And then looking on here, it says to squirt into that hole on the side where the set screw goes. So I'm going to show you guys a little trick that I came up with to get some grease up in there. Took a plastic bag, cut the corner off. I'm going to stick a little dollop of grease in that corner and then stick it in there and squeeze it. Let's get that tip into that hole a little and just kind of squeeze it in. So when I squeezed it through that hole, it just ended up out in the center anyways. So I don't think that I accomplished anything squirting it through that hole that putting dollops on my finger and sticking it down into the hole against the walls didn't accomplish already. But I just wanted to do that step because it said to in the instruction. And I'm doing it out of order anyways because you're supposed to stick the motor in first and then grease it. But I just felt like this way would be easier. This motor is super heavy and you got to get it up through that hole. So I used a little styrofoam that it came on and set it so that it's up high enough and I can just lift this up and get it aligned and slide it down. Be careful as you slide that in. You don't want to bend the edge of your seals over. But now that it's slid up far enough, and I got it aligned with the bolt holes, oh, it's still not quite high enough. I need to go a little higher to get the little screws started in. But I'll drop them in up here. And pick up a little, and hopefully go ahead and set it on my knee. I got 2 of those screws started. Now I got to get the other 2 in. Now I'm going to use my Allen wrench and I'm going to tighten these in a cross pattern and then go back and check them. Should be good. Now next step is to put these set screws, they're calling them, into the sides of this seal assembly. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't consider this a set screw because they're saying not to put it in contact with the motor shaft. I'm going to call those a sealing screw or a drain plug, so to speak, so that it keeps some of that grease that you put in there. I do not think that it's an actual set screw because a set screw would go up against a motor or a shaft to keep an assembly in place. Go ahead and drop me a comment down below if you think I'm wrong in what I'm saying, but I think that they just misused the word set screw and added some confusion to their manual. I brought in the old T-handle Allen wrench to do these, but I think that I'm going to have a little bit of a problem because it's going to be right up against that bottom. So I'm probably going to have to go back out, get a different one. Back out to the tool container, got me the other set of little Allen wrenches. Head on back in. Alright, so I got those set screws tightened in. They really don't get tight, but I just put them flush with the outside because I knew that they're about the thickness of this, or length, that this is thick, and so they're not going to be touching the shaft, but they will plug those holes from grease coming out and keep that shaft and these seals lubed up a little bit. Next step is to put this big rubber O-ring on. So let's grab it out of the box here. And I read on some of the forums and whatnot that you should kind of grease this and keep it kind of supple and lasting longer, and it seals better around this outside edge. So I'm going to go ahead and rub just a little bit of grease on it. Just a light coating of grease in that groove. Rubbed it around this O-ring and a little bit on top once I put it in. So hopefully that seals that upper edge, keeps stuff from coming out and over, and keeps that O-ring nice and supple into the future. I might come to regret this and just think that it makes a mess, but I've read that this helps, so I'm giving it a shot. Step 12, we're going to insert the actual centrifuge piece into the inside. I'm going to go ahead and get this saran wrap off of it, and we'll get it set down inside. Next step says insert torque clamp over motor shaft with the nut up and tighten using a 7/8. So I'd imagine they're talking about this guy. So it goes down over the motor. Oh yeah, fits down in there nicely. And then we'll tighten that up. Now, before getting this stuff tightened up, you want about 1/8 to 1/4 inch between the edge of this and the bottom. So you want to pick it up just a tad bit. There it is, all tightened up. Just a little 1/8 inch or so gap between the bottom casting and this lip of this ring. That gives it enough room for when it's spinning, it's not rubbing. Now, I made a small mistake there, guys, and you guys are going to see that I made a mistake once I hook up the power. But that center clamp part, you want to make sure that it's up off the bottom just a tad bit as well. You don't want it pushed all the way down. So the next step, it says to pick your fittings for your top and put them in. This is the setup I'm going with, is a plug in the middle, a 1/2 inch PEX to NPT adapter for my inlet, because I'm going to heat my oil, and coming out of my water heater is going to be 1/2 inch. Most of my other stuff is going to be 3/4, except for that. And then this, I'm going to use a little riser and an elbow into an NPT to PEX 3/4 adapter, and this is going to be my vent tube. Well, got the thread sealing on there. Now I'm going to get that first one put in. All three got their thread sealant. All three got tightened up and installed. Step 16 is a 1/4 inch male NPT to 1/4 inch male flare adapter. Well, I didn't want to buy one of those, but I did have one of these 1/4 inch NPT airline hookup hoses, and I think that'll do basically the same thing. Just get it down a little bit, neck it down from the 1/2 inch, 3/4, whatever you're coming in as, and yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this. So first piece is this little adapter that they include with the kit. Get it in there, tightened up with that thread sealant. Now that we've got the adapter in, went ahead and thread sealanted this air compressor fitting, and we get that tightened in there. So there's the lid all put together. Next is going to be the wiring. Now for wiring this little box and it to the motor. It says to use 14-2 wire, which is 14 gauge, 2 leads plus a ground. So it's actually 3 wires in it, but it's called 14-2. I'm using this extension cord that it got messed up, but it's still got a good plug on it, so I can plug and unplug this. And now, how do you wire it? Black goes into the LR, white goes into the NS, green goes over here to the ground. So there's the 3 wires hooked up. Now, before we get too far along into setting this up, I want to adjust the dip switches and the frequencies. So it says to put the top one over, the bottom one over. So let's get that done. So the top one over. I'm just using a tiny screwdriver. And the bottom one over. All the rest stay off. Now let's look at where they've got these pointed. We've got 75%. So let's turn that right there. This one says 5S, but then they've got it pointed at 30. Okay, so this is how fast it's going to accelerate and decelerate. So I'm going to leave it turned down and see how it does. Later on, if it doesn't speed up properly or slow down properly, I will adjust that. But their instructions are kind of goofy because it's literally got the arrow at the 30, but then it says 5S. So I'm going to go with the lower and just leave it at 5. Now, this, it says to put it 40 hertz. So let's adjust that one up to 40. There we go. We're going to call that good. So top over, bottom over, leave the rest alone. Got those adjusted, so we're done in here. Now we've got this little guy that's run, stop, reverse, forward, and to adjust the speed. So you carefully pull it up out of the box there, and we're going to want to put it right in here, so those prongs slide down and in, and then we're going to tighten the screws across the top. So be real careful with those prongs. Make sure that the spots they're going into are loosened, and so that it gives them room to slide up in. There is like a little tab down here, so you got to kind of pop it in a little bit, get it slid in, and kind of, and then it seats itself. And then go ahead and tighten all those screws up. Don't go crazy, you don't want to be stripping anything, but you want them snug so the electricity flows well. So on the supply side, as we said, it's a 14-2 wire, which is 2 wires plus a ground. For the motor side, you want a 14-3. And the 14-3 means it's 14 gauge. It's got 1, 2, 3 conductors plus the ground. The ground is the bare one. I went ahead and stripped those just a tad bit, not real long, and I put a loop on there. So I'm going to go ahead and get them connected down here at the bottom. And it says that it does not matter what one you put into what holes. There's those connected. We got the ground to here, and I just did red, black, white. Again, the instructions say it does not matter what order these ones are in. Suggest a 1/4 inch socket or a nut driver to get these guys. I tried a flathead screwdriver, and I think they had He-Man putting them in at the factory, so they would not come out. 1/4 inch it is. There we are, into the motor wiring. I'm going to suggest you use one of these 3/8 inch clamp connectors for a 1/2 inch knockout, because on that motor I think it's going to vibrate quite a bit, and you don't want your wires going through a sharp hole and ending up wearing through and shorting out on you. So I'm going to use one of these. Basically, what they do is they go through the hole, and then you put the nut on to the back side, and you feed your wire through and you clamp it down so it doesn't move around or get pulled out or chafe on the edges of this deal. Alright guys, so for test purposes, before I take it out to the shed and set it up, I've got it plugged in over there. I got the wiring, red going to orange, white going to white, black going to blue. Go ahead and flip the switch, and it's just going because I think that I had this down too far because it was not spinning, was not moving, but then I took this off and it's able to spin. I'm hoping that I didn't mess up this little seal bushing thing by having it down too tight. But now I'm going to go ahead and install this again and see if I can spin it up. So I got this gapped a little bit up off the bottom, made sure and gapped that up a little bit off that seal, so now it's spinning freer. So let's go ahead and hit the switch again. Oh yeah, she's spinning up now. Ooh. And it is going clockwise, so it's going the proper direction for forward. If you power it up and it's going the wrong way, then you need to switch two of your wires, blue and black, white and blue, white and black, doesn't matter. Switch two of the wires and it should make it go the proper direction. Let's adjust this and see if it goes faster. Turn it back down. Pretty neat. It's definitely spinning. So now that I tested it, I know that it's working, I know that it's spinning the proper direction. I'm going to go ahead and unplug this, and then I'm going to wait about 5 minutes before I mess with any of these wires and disconnect them, and then I'll take it out to the shed and hook it up out there. I'm at my control box here on the wall, just underneath my plug-in. I've got it wired into a switch up here to where I can turn it on and off easily. And then the wire is going to go right over here to my shelf where I'm going to set up my centrifuge. But I think I'm going to cut out a piece of plywood as a place for that centrifuge to sit. So now that I've got it out here where I'm going to set it up, left it unplugged, mounted the wall, went ahead and fed the wires through that clamp that I was showing you guys, clamped them up. Now we'll go ahead and get all the wires connected and put the cover back on. So I did red to orange, blue to black, and white to white. And then I'll connect the ground to that green screw. So we've got this guy wired up to the box, into a switch, into the outlet. So let's go ahead and get it plugged in. And then we'll flip the switch. And we're spinning. The last thing that we've got to do is all the plumbing. So we got to go from this tank to the hot water heater, out of the hot water heater to the centrifuge, from the centrifuge down to that barrel, and into a waste barrel also. But that's for another video, guys. Tune in next Sunday. I'll have another video uploaded and you guys can continue this journey, me figuring out waste motor oil to black diesel and learning for yourselves. Maybe you can save a few bucks on fuel. If you want to follow along as I learn to turn waste motor oil into black diesel, how I set things up, I'll teach you guys all the things that I learn along the way. Hit that subscribe button. Really be appreciated. Till next time, keep building shit.